Welcome back to everybody in either my online art appreciation or my on-campus art appreciation class. We are starting Unit 9, and so Unit 9 and Unit 10 will be a little bit briefer, a little less, fewer lectures than before. So for Unit 9 here we have one art historical lecture, and then we'll have one on color and one um, on illustration as an art medium. And actually I want to talk a little bit about the other things going on. So remember that coming up this week for both classes, a little bit later for the online class, but test number 3 is coming up on Friday. And so along with these videos for Unit 9, I'm also going to be finishing the videos in which I kind of prepare you for writing the paper and discuss comparing works in a number of different ways as a way of kind of preparing you to think about how to make your comparison paper work. And there will also be at least one lecture that will be kind of reviewing some ahead of the test number 3. And so maybe I will get all of those recorded this afternoon. To start with, let's talk about the art historical information. And so if you think about where we have gotten to, right, very first unit we had a little bit of art historical information about the Paleolithic, and we have gone from the Paleolithic and the Neolithic, which we discussed very, very briefly, and we've gone all the way through art history, jumping from place to place a lot and jumping a lot of time periods, but we have gotten all the way to modernism. Now, one of the things that some of you may notice as we go through this lecture will probably be in 3 parts, is that a lot of the artwork doesn't look particularly modern to you. And so one of the things to do, first of all, is just to reshift your expectations about what is modern or modernist, because modern and modernist are really they are terms that from the 19th century and apply more to the early 20th century than they do to our times. We tend to think of modern as the same thing as contemporary, as right now, but that is not how art historians or cultural historians think of the term. So many, a cultural historian might make the case that the modernist period really, or the modern period really begins in the Renaissance, but generally art historians or literature professors would see the modernist period begin with realism in the 19th century, and so with the end of Romanticism. And the thing to think about in terms of what kind of connects these to modernism in general, because in today's lecture we're going to get all the way to Van Gogh and Cézanne, but what connects all of these artists to the later artists who are also modernists, such as Mondrian and Picasso or Braque, is that there's a belief in progress, right? A belief that art itself is progressing, is improving, or is developing and changing over time, and that essentially it is getting better as it's developing, and a belief in the idea that there are formal elements to art, to painting, and that these things that we figure out about painting, that they are universal, not just painting, to art in general. And this also is connected to this idea of essentialism. We see just the beginning hints of that in the modernism that we're looking at in this lecture, but if there is a second part to talking about high modernism, which I might have a lecture about that, you'll see quite clearly the idea of essentialism becomes very important. That the idea that part of the role of an artist is to figure out what the essentials of a thing is, whether that's the thing that you're representing, or more importantly, towards the end of modernism, it's the essential thing about painting itself or about art making itself, right? That sculptures should be essential to their own form rather than to the thing that they're depicting. So that kind of is a theme that's running through this whole lecture in it. But what's interesting probably for you is how, although we see these kind of modernist ideas, the artwork looks very 19th century. So keep that in mind. We're going to start with realism, and that's probably a good place to go. All right. So first with Gustave Courbet, and I picked this this particular piece, the Desperate Man, by Courbet, an early painting, and I picked it as well, the first one to see, as part to just kind of emphasize the fact that the transitions between things are often subtle, and they're never straight outright one thing or another. So you can see a very romantic influence on a young Gustave Courbet, but Courbet saw himself as a realist. Believed, he famously said, show me an angel and I will paint it, and but he believed his paintings were very realist, and for him that meant, as much as anything, a social realist, that he was interested in painting the lives of people the way they really were, and paying attention to the different classes of people, and but it also affected the way he painted. And what's interesting is that as a realist, he wasn't afraid at the same time to paint allegorical paintings. So here's a painting where it's completely a fictitious scene, and it's purposely a fictitious scene because it has all the possible subjects he's been looking at or thinking about all in the studio with him. Of course, and then he's painting a landscape. Courbet loved painting the landscape, and devoted more and more time of his end of his career painting landscapes. So, but this is a fantastic, gorgeous painting, and in some ways as complex as La Meninas in terms of, all the ways you could think about reading it. The difference being for me, I think that La Meninas, you could look at it 50 times before you really start thinking of it as an allegorical painting, whereas this painting, it hits you right up front. There's only one way to see this, and to see it as an allegory. And an artist that I'm going to talk quite a lot about, or at least show a lot of images, is Henri Fatin-Latour, partially because he's a bit of a favorite of mine, and because I think he kind of defines this in-between phase, this shift from the realists and the romanticists to the artists who later become the impressionists. And in this painting by the table, there are some of the young early impressionists seated there at the table, basically the group of artists who were strong admirers of Edouard Manet. And here in this painting, Studio at Batignolles, Manet is actually painting and lecturing. And once again, it's a group of young artists. So Latour is younger than Manet, probably I think about the same age as Degas, but I think maybe just because he's naturally more conservative, more of a traditionalist, his artwork more kind of fits into this in-between place between where Courbet was, and even you even see a little bit of a tightness to Latour that's almost a kind of an Ang influence. He was an amazing still life painter, absolutely fantastic. And we've looked at other works of Latour. Specifically, we've seen this lithograph multiple times, but he was a truly quite a remarkable portrait painter. This portrait painting of Manet, I think it's just a work of genius. Such beautiful color, and he was a friend and highly influenced by Manet. And Manet was kind of like he took the ideas of Courbet. And one of the things to think about that, hold on, just go back for a second, about Courbet, that's probably where I should end, is that Courbet and his realism is modernist for a number of reasons, but